It's just labor. Why do people like you always act like they are dying when it's just a natural process?" The nurse mocked Grace because she was black. Despite how much Grace pleaded and the pain she was in, the nurse paid no attention. Instead, she continued mocking her. Unknown to the nurse, the husband of this black woman was the owner of the hospital. She was about to receive the shock of her life. What unfolded, and how did the nurse react after finding out who she had just messed with? Dracoa, the capital of Draka, was well known by a lot of other countries for its medical advancements and for how it looked down on black people. It's no surprise since blacks were first traded in as slaves, and those from Dracoa were white-skinned. Eventually, Dracoa became a nation to all, blacks and whites alike. However, blacks were still scorned, but they could live without fear. Like every other lady, Grace wanted the best for herself. Her peers laughed at her whenever she described her dream man, and as a black girl from Dracoa, it felt impossible. Grace dreamed of getting married to a black man, well known for his skills and education. A man of such status would be an advantage not just to her, but to their kids. Generally, this wouldn't have been possible because black-skinned people were not allowed in prestigious schools, and they had a lot of restrictions placed on them. Grace wasn't going to let that stop her from wishing her dream man into existence. She went to the mall on a weekend, and there he was, sitting on one of the benches. Someone she liked, just there sitting down with a cup of coffee in his hand, but she also had to vet him to know if he was her dream man and dream job. Well, they began seeing each other, and he had everything Grace wanted in a man. Time flew by quickly, and they got married. All was set, and it was time for them to have their first baby. The expected date of delivery came, and there was nothing. No sign of a contraction until 2 days later, when Grace was rushed to the maternity ward of Oboro Hospital. The maternity ward was like a world on its own, with movement in all directions. Nurses moved from room to room with monitors beeping like vehicle horns in traffic. The cries of newborn babies were heard from every inch of the ward. Grace was on one of the hospital beds. She held the bedsheet tightly as different waves of pain hit her. Her skin didn't feel like hers anymore. Sweat dripped all over her body. It was her first time, and she had only heard stories about how intense contractions and labor could be from women in her family. Grace called for help countless times, but no one paid any attention to her. She was in pain, but no one was there to help or soothe her. After what felt like hours, a nurse finally showed up, and she still didn't take Grace seriously. "Please help me," Grace said as she noticed the nurse didn't look like she was ready to help her. The nurse paid no attention to her plea for help. She took a seat as if waiting for someone to come in. Legs crossed, she picked up a magazine that was beside Grace's bed and started glancing through it. Grace was in unbearable pain, and she kept calling for help. She asked the nurse for her name, and the woman reluctantly answered, saying, "Helen." Grace pleaded, "Helen, please, can you attend to me? I can't bear the pain anymore." "Oh, come on," Helen said as she stood up and moved toward the bed where Grace was. "It's just labor. Why do people like you always act like they are dying when it's just a natural process?" Despite the unbearable pain Grace was in, what Helen said hit her more as if piercing through her heart, and she spoke up. "What do you mean by people like me?" Grace asked with her fist clenched as if she were about to punch the nurse. She knew exactly what Helen meant, but she wanted Helen to say it. Another wave of contraction pain hit Grace, and it was unbearable. She had to deal with what Helen said and hold the fort until she was attended to. Grace, in pain, decided to plead with Helen to help her, or get her someone else who would. "Please," Grace whispered as she faced Helen. "Please, I need help. I need a doctor. I feel something is wrong." Helen laughed hysterically, shaking her head before responding. "Doctors are busy with actual emergencies," she said as she reached out to check the name of the person she was talking to on the patient's card on the table beside the bed. Helen waved a dismissive hand and continued with her response. "Mrs. Grace, not every little cramp deserves special attention, especially for one with your skin color. Women have been giving birth for centuries. You're not the first and won't be the last." Grace could feel the anger in her grow exponentially, but she had to keep calm and not do anything that would hamper her chances of getting the attention she needed. She had heard of nurses like Helen, who saw black patients as dramatic and less important. The only difference was skin color, so why should they be treated differently? Grace thought to herself that this wasn't the first time Helen would be like this to someone of her skin color. She would have to deal with it for the time being. Grace, in pain, tried turning to her side, but it wasn't possible. She felt that for every move she made, the pain tripled. "I want another nurse," she screamed through the pain she was feeling, and Helen laughed. "Is that so, Grace?" she asked as she moved closer to the bed and mockingly said, "You and your kind do not get to make demands. Not here, not anywhere, especially not over a natural pain which you are trying to blow out of proportion, sweetheart. You'll get the same treatment as everyone else with your black skin color, and that treatment is waiting." Grace knew that Helen's words were to mock and hurt her, maybe push her into saying or doing something she would regret, but Grace kept her cool with the situation despite the pain she was in. She just had to hold on and bear the pain until something happened. "Okay, if you won't meet any of my demands, then at least help bring my husband when he gets here and begins looking for his wife," Grace said with her voice barely audible as she was flinching in pain. Helen laughed again, and this time the laughter was louder. It drew attention from other nurses passing by the room Grace was in, but none questioned what was happening. "Is that so? Well, I can bring him to you, but I think I have had enough talk for one day with black people, so I would let someone else do that. Though I doubt he can be in the same profession as me. If he is, there's no way he can lecture me or teach me because you all are beneath me." Grace didn't answer Helen. She closed her eyes and focused on her breathing because she was losing breath. She had no choice but to wait and endure the pain. Grace knew that her husband's coming there would mean many things would change. Someone would get punished, and the entire hospital would feel the impact of her husband's wrath. Unfortunately, Nurse Helen didn't know this. Nurse Helen continued to mock Grace, seeing as she was quiet and in severe pain, her voice sharp. Grace clenched her fist tightly with the bedsheet in her palm. She was in unimaginable pain, and Helen was making it worse. Helen went back to the seat in the room, and with legs crossed, she added, "Black people always love to make a scene out of nothing," she hissed. "White women have come in here and delivered their babies without anyone hearing a single word from them. But you? All you have done ever since you got here is complain and scream, as if the world were coming to an end. You are not the only one having a bad day. I am too. So please keep quiet and let me rest." Grace would have responded, but her baby was coming and she needed help. She could feel it in her bones that the child could no longer wait. Something had to be done, and fast. Unknown to Grace, help was already on the way. A fleet of cars was parked outside the hospital lobby door, and a man with his team, as well as a couple of other men, came down and headed for the lobby doors. The security guard on duty outside the lobby door saw the man and straightened up immediately. The man and his team entered the hospital lobby, and it became unusually tense. Doctors whispered to themselves. Nurses straightened their uniforms. Everyone had to behave themselves. There was a sense of urgency in the lobby. Nurses who sat down doing nothing ran around to look busy and to not get caught by the man or any member of the team. In seconds, wards were filled with nurses attending to patients. No one who didn't work in that hospital would understand why everyone became tense. This was a black man they were all trying to avoid. A black man who made a name for himself. Victor Adetimean. His presence commanded attention. He was not a man to be toyed with. Even the government recognized him as a force to be reckoned with. The hospitals he handled and owned were nothing but the best in the country and about 7 other countries. The usual calm and warmth he carried when walking the hospital halls was absent. This was a part of him not known to anyone. He was pissed. His anger was evident. He looked like an untamed beast. His voice was hard when he asked, "Where is my wife?" His voice was calm and hard from the anger he felt. It had an unmistakable sharpness. The receptionist had just resumed her duty and wasn't aware of what to answer because she didn't know either. "Sir, please give me a minute to check the list of patients brought in today. I was not aware your wife was brought into the hospital. I just began my shift," the receptionist said under her breath, as she was in fear of what could happen. "Meet me on the way to the maternity ward when you get the name." His voice was firm as he moved to the maternity ward. The receptionist hurried behind him with a list of patients brought in that day. She was scared, but she didn't want to annoy him further. Sir, your wife is not on the list of patients brought in," she managed to say. "What do you mean by that?" he barked. He was losing the calmness in his voice, and it was evident. He snatched the list from the receptionist, and his eyes frantically swept through it to see for himself. He saw 3 women in the maternity ward named Grace, who had no last name. He took out his phone as if to make a call, and then opened his call log to see the time his wife called him, and that was how he got the timestamp for when she came in. "Where's the maternity ward room 306?" he asked, and the receptionist led him to the room. Without another word, Victor followed behind. He was in a hurry and needed to see his wife. A team of high-ranking doctors, sensing trouble, hurried to follow him. Back in room 306, Helen didn't leave or attend to Grace. She was still mocking Grace. "Honestly, if you people took better care of yourselves, maybe labor wouldn't be so hard." She laughed before adding, "Black people, always so dramatic." Grace tried to respond, but the pain kept her mute. The door to the room that was halfway open flung wide open, and there was a chill in the room. Victor's presence in the room changed the atmosphere. Grace, on seeing her husband, smiled and gave a sigh of relief despite the pain she was in. Helen wondered why Grace smiled and sighed. Then she followed Grace's gaze toward the door, only for her face to instantly become pale and white. Victor stood there at the door. The room became silent for a moment. Helen swallowed hard. The man before her wasn't just any concerned husband. He was the Victor Adetameyin, the billionaire CEO who owned this hospital and was paid to manage other hospitals, even by the government. Helen knew she was in trouble because she had mocked his wife. Grace tried lifting her head, but was too weak to do so. She didn't need to say a word. Victor had already seen and heard enough. Victor entered the room, fixing his gaze on Helen. His expression was unreadable, but his presence was more than enough to get anyone under him to tremble. "Who do you think you're speaking to?" he asked as calmly as he could. Helen tried to respond, but it was as if a bone was stuck in her throat. It felt heavy. "Sir, What's your name, nurse?" he demanded. "Helen, sir," she managed to say. "Helen, you had the guts to mock my wife in labor. You denied her the care she needed." Helen hurriedly stood up and tried looking for the appropriate excuse. "Sir, I didn't mean." "You're fired, Nurse Helen. I would also see to it that your medical license is revoked from you, ruining any chance you might get to practice as a nurse." The words hit Helen like a judge giving a death sentence to a criminal in court. Helen didn't want to back down without a fight. She couldn't let this incident ruin her life completely. She looked to see that Grace was still in no condition to talk because of the pain before she attempted her excuse. "Sir, I didn't mock your wife. I didn't even know she was your wife, and I only stated a general fact about most black women based on my observations as a nurse in the maternity ward." Victor was furious. Helen still had the guts to cook up something like that. He wanted to hit her, but that would give a picture of him that could tarnish his image as a person, and it could also affect his wife, so he kept his hands to himself. He sighed, took out his phone from his pocket, and played a recording from his recorded call. Everything Helen said from the moment she entered the room. There was no denying it. There was no way out for Helen. Helen had just dug a deeper hole for herself, a hole she couldn't crawl out of. "How?" she managed to ask. Victor explained how he was in a meeting when his wife called him. She told him she was having contractions and forgot to hang up the phone while the driver rushed to her side to help her get into the car. The driver didn't know she was on call and just packed the phone with everything else. On getting to the hospital, the only thing taken out of the bag of things they brought for the baby was the phone, which was in one of the drawers if ever there was a need for his wife to use it. He added that he was sure his wife also forgot she was on call with him, and he also thought he had hung up the call when he gave his PA the phone to hold on to. Victor said that after a few minutes, his PA rushed to his side and told him there was trouble. Since all his calls were recorded, he went back to the recordings as his PA asked him to, and he heard everything. He had to leave the meeting for his secretary to handle since she already knew his stand. He rushed down to the hospital and still met his wife unattended, and Helen was still mocking her. Doctors who were watching the entire thing were left speechless. They would have pleaded on Helen's behalf, but she crossed the line in every way and went against the oath she took when she became a nurse. "Please, sir, I am sorry," Helen managed to say, but it was already too late. "Get out." Those were Victor's last words to her. Helen's eyes filled up with tears as the reality of her mistake seeped in. Two of Victor's security guards entered the room and moved Helen out as she cried, but no one paid any attention to her. The security guards handed her over to the hospital security and gave their orders to them. It was clear. Helen looked at Grace, who was still on the bed as if pleading for Grace to help her. Grace was not going to sympathize with her. She smiled despite the pain she was in, and Helen knew Grace wasn't going to get involved. As Helen was escorted out, Victor turned to face the other nurses, his voice now calm. "Get the best doctors we have in this hospital. My wife will receive the care she deserves. Make it happen now." Everyone ran around, and within moments, Grace was surrounded by a team of the hospital's finest doctors. Her comfort had now become their top priority. Victor moved to his wife's side and held her hand. She was happy he made it there in time. "You're safe now," he said. "I would make sure no black woman has to suffer this. Not in my hospital or under anyone I manage." Grace smiled weakly, knowing her husband wouldn't go back on his words. She was also happy that the woman who had mocked her would never step foot in that hospital again, or any hospital again for the rest of her life, except granted a pardon. Helen sat on the pavement outside the hospital, her hands trembling. She felt suffocated by the air around her. She had spent years barking orders at patients, laughing off complaints, and treating certain people as if they didn't matter. Now, she was nothing. A nobody who would soon be forgotten because she had been thrown out like garbage. Her license would be revoked. She just lost the power she thought she had. Helen found it hard to believe that an hour ago she had been mocking a woman in labor, assuming she had all the power in the room. She had no idea that the woman's husband wasn't just some ordinary man, but the one who controlled the entire hospital. Inside the hospital, Grace was resting after giving birth to her newborn daughter. Victor sat beside her. He had tears of joy in his eyes. His first child was here already, and he was there to welcome her into the world. His expression had softened, but there were still signs of anger. "Are you okay and comfortable?" he asked. Grace could hear the guilt in his voice, even with how calm he sounded. Grace took in a deep breath and exhaled. Her body was finally relaxing after the hours of pain she had endured. "You are here. Our child is here." "Yes, I am now." Grace's eye caught hold of a line of doctors and nurses who stood waiting outside her room door. They were ready to assist her at a moment's notice. They saw what happened to Helen, and none of them dared to make the same mistake. Now, she was a celebrity patient who was taken seriously and attended to with all urgency. Grace told her husband that it shouldn't have taken his power and influence to get them to treat her with dignity, which was why she didn't give her full details when she was brought to the hospital, but at least now, she was safe. She looked back at Victor, squeezing his hand. "I would have handled the pain because I can," she said. "What I was scared of was that no one would help me, that I would be ignored or forgotten, that maybe I would have lost our child, all because someone didn't care enough to do their job." Victor nodded in agreement. "Situations like this will never happen again. Not here or anywhere else I manage. Not to you or anyone else." Victor kissed her forehead, and she nodded in agreement. "I know the man I got married to, and I know you're going to make sure of that." First thing in the morning, I would do a full review of patient care policies in the house, because I can't leave you. I would have it sent to the hospitals I manage, and I would hire a special team to monitor how black patients are treated in these hospitals. If any staff member dismisses a patient's pain again, they would suffer the same consequences as Helen. Grace smiled softly. Victor leaned over, pressing a soft kiss on their daughter's head. "Our daughter and other black kids would not have to be treated differently, because this is where the change starts from." Grace allowed herself to relax completely. She thought about the saying that he who laughs last laughs best, and this was her case. She had won. Helen was gone. Anyone else like Helen would have to go too. The hospital was changing, and gradually, the country would change. What can you say about Grace's experience with Helen? Does anyone deserve to be treated that way because of their skin color? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe to this channel. You can also turn on the notification to receive updates about new posts. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.